No more bullshit. No more bullshit.
Flashback.
This administration is taking into consideration how hard the American people are working, and their tax dollars actually matter to this administration. You know, just during this pause, Doge and OMB have actually found that there was $37 million that was about to go out the door to the World Health Organization, which is an organization, as you all know, that President Trump, with the swipe of his pen in that executive order, is no longer wants the United States to be a part of. So that wouldn't be in line with the president's agenda. Doge and OMB also found that there was about to be 50 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza.
That's fucked up, man.
Dozens of federal government agencies are registered but don't even exist. In fact, some agencies listed were only temporary or have been long gone for decades. Joining us this morning to discuss is the Deputy Public Policy Editor for OpenTheBooks.com, Rachel O'Brien. Good morning to you, Rachel. Always good to see you. Now, this is important as the Doge Committee looks to cut wasteful government spending, obviously. Just how many federal agencies are there, and what exactly is the status of the ones that are now defunct?
Yeah, so we're talking about the Federal Register. That's the official journal of the U.S. government. It's where all the rules and public notices can be found. You can find executive orders. So it lists 441 agencies, but almost 1/5 of them, 75 of them, are effectively defunct or obsolete. So 39 of those agencies were temporary commissions. They were created to study maybe a single issue and produce a report. For example, the Commission on the Future of the U.S. Aerospace Industry, 21st Century Workforce Commission. Those were all temporary, but they're all still listed there. 12 agencies have closed. They've had their duties merged with another agency. For instance, the Oklahoma City National Memorial Trust and the Valles Caldera Trust, those were separate entities. They're now part of the National Park Service, but they're still listed on the Federal Register. So if the federal government were a book, there would really be no usable table of contents for the average American to find what they're seeking.
Isn't that wild? But in order for Doge or anyone else to make a roadmap for cutting wasteful spending, there needs to be obviously an accurate picture of federal agencies. So how is your organization, how is Open the Books doing this?
Yeah, so this is shockingly bad record keeping, especially for the official record keeper of the U.S. government. Yeah. So, they're not updated. So members of the public, you have to do deep research to find out about the composition of their own government. So Open the Books is going to periodically release a list of agencies. There are 366 agencies that are receiving federal funds. So we will have studied which ones these are. We're going to chart their growth, their expense, and activity over time to determine if taxpayers are getting their money's worth and if they're even getting anything at all out of these agencies. So we're going to keep tabs on this and hoping Doge will delete these obsolete agencies.
And for those agencies that are now defunct, where's that money going? That's
right.
The bigger
Well, some
question.
of them get funding. A lot of them don't, but some do still get funding. President Biden was still funding. His budget request had some of these entities in it before he left office.
And we're watching Doge because they're working around the clock to cut our bloated government. They're trying to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. We got an update from J.D. Vance, and he likes what he sees so far.
What Doge is going to do, it's going to save money. And I really believe it's already identified a lot of cost savings. The most important thing that it's going to do, I don't even think is the cost savings. It's making the bureaucracy responsive to the elected president. We're talking about making the people's government responsive to the people's elected president.
But not everybody was happy with the cuts, especially not federal bureaucrats. They're scared stiff. Fear and chaos grip federal workers as Trump rapidly remakes the government. Cheryl, he came in, he said he was going to do this. He's doing it. He actually was kind of graceful in the amount of time that he gave those federal workers where he said, you can take the buyout we'll pay you for till the end of September. Some people thought that was very generous, but he's doing what he said. He's doing what he promised the American people, what they voted for.
Well, and, the whole return to the office part of that conversation is pretty clear. Senator Joni Ernst was the first to come out and clearly say to all of us, only 6% of the federal workforce is actually in the office. That's number one. Number two, all the real estate, start to sell that off. There are already moves happening in Washington and Congress to make this happen as far as the real estate picture goes. But, tying this back to energy and the tariffs and the economy and what would make us stronger as a nation, besides fiscal responsibility and not having these massive debt payments that we're paying right now because of the trillions of dollars that we're running in deficits in this nation, the best part of what J.D. Vance is saying is not only are we going to make our country stronger and more energy efficient, an energy emergency, as Donald Trump has called it, but also we're going to run as a leaner, meaner entity. Called a corporation, called Donald Trump the CEO. I don't have a problem with that. But this is where these business practices can be effectively applied, in my opinion, to the bureaucracy that is the federal government.
Elon Musk and the Doge team are looking at how much money the federal government spends, and he posted this on X. The Doge team discovered, among other things, that the payment approval officers at Treasury were instructed always to approve payments, even to known fraudulent or terrorist groups. They literally never denied a payment in their entire careers, not even once. What do you make of Elon Musk going through Washington right now with a Hoover?
I'm okay with it. And I think the American people are okay with it. Everybody knows the dirty little secret about government. It drips with fat. No one's ever done an exercise like this. I thought he'd get a lot more pushback from Congress, and he's not. He's going in there with a spatula, and he's scraping out billions of dollars, and people are okay with it. After all, it's taxpayers' money. Right. Why not do this? If you sit around your kitchen table, you got to have a budget every year. Right. Why can't we apply the same kind of philosophy to government? And that's why he's getting a lot of latitude and a lot of slack, even though he's a controversial guy. But look at the executional skills he has. Sure. There's nobody like him. Let him do his thing.
I mean, my frustration with USAID goes back to my time in Congress. It's a completely unresponsive agency. It's supposed to respond to policy directives of the State Department, and it refuses to do so. So the functions of USAID, there are a lot of functions of USAID that are going to continue, that are going to be part of American foreign policy, but it has to be aligned with American foreign policy. I said very clearly during my confirmation hearing that every dollar we spend and every program we fund, that will be aligned with the national interest of the United States. And USAID has a history of sort of ignoring that and deciding that there's somehow a global charity separate from the national interest. These are taxpayer dollars. And so I'm very troubled by these reports that they've been unwilling to cooperate with people who are asking simple questions about what does this program do, who gets the money, who are our contractors, who's funded. And that sort of level of insubordination makes it impossible to conduct a sort of mature and serious review that I think foreign aid writ large should have. We're spending taxpayer money here. These are not donor dollars. These are taxpayer dollars. And we owe the American people the assurances that every dollar we are spending abroad is being spent on something that furthers our national interest. And so far, a lot of the people that work at USAID have just simply refused to cooperate.
End of flashback.
Things are not as they appear to be. And in Washington, that's not unusual. In fact, that may be the norm, that in Washington, things are often not what they appear to be. If you follow the news, you've been seeing reports of Elon Musk and Doge and getting rid of waste and fraud and abuse by the billions, if not trillions of dollars. And yet we are meeting here today, though, because Congress, namely the Senate, wants to increase federal spending. So on the one hand, you have Elon Musk and Doge and the Democrats complaining to high heaven, he's cutting too much, they're cutting too much. And Senate Republicans are coming forward today to pass a budget to allow them to raise federal spending. What gives? Are Republicans for getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse and reducing the deficit, balancing the budget, as the president says? Or are they really for increasing spending $340 billion? The budget that we will vote on will allow increase spending in the military by $150 billion, increase spending for the border $175 billion, $20 billion for the Coast Guard. It adds up to about $340 billion. Well, if we were fiscally prudent, if we were fiscally conservative, why wouldn't we take the savings from Elon Musk and Doge and move it over here and help with the border? Why would we be doing a brand new bill to increase spending by $340 billion? That's because the Senate is acting as it always has. The Senate hasn't gotten the message. President Trump came to town, a new way of thinking. They're shuttering agencies, they're shutting people down, they're finding things like $2 million spent in Guatemala for sex changes, $3 million spent in Brazil for a girl-centric climate change, $4.8 million spent in Ukraine for social media influencers. While you're at it, we spent, not we, but the people who vote for this, I've voted against all of this, but the members of the Senate who voted for this spent several $100,000 sending designers in Ukraine to the fashion show in Paris. It goes on and on. Thousands of dollars for a trans opera in Colombia, more thousands of dollars for a trans comic book in Peru, hundreds of thousands of dollars spent studying rats to see if lonely rats use more cocaine than well-socialized rats. Guess what? Lonely rats love the cocaine. You spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of your money on this craziness. Why not take that crazy spending that Doge and Elon Musk are finding and move it over to securing the border? Instead, fiscal conservatives are faced with a bill they're putting forward to just simply increase the spending. I'm all for moving it around. I'm all for saving it from the craziness and pushing it over into something more valuable. There is a procedure for doing this. It's a special procedure, doesn't require any Democrat vote. It can happen through simple majority, and it has a fancy name. It's called rescission. So all the administration would have to do is bundle together several $100 billion of savings, which it appears they're finding, bundle it together in one bill, send it back to us, and by simple majority, without any help from the Democrats, Republicans can cut spending. Instead, things aren't what they appear to be. You see all this great work being done to cut spending, to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, and then you see the Senate acting. We're going to vote all night long to set up a bill to increase spending by $340 billion. There is a true philosophical debate within the Republican Party and really within both parties about what the biggest threats to our country are. Are the gravest threats to America from within or from without? I would argue that they're from within.
We start with a Fox News alert just moments ago. The Senate approving its budget blueprint. The bill passing 52 to 48 after a nearly 10-hour vote-a-rama. All Republicans voting for the bill except Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. You are watching Fox and Friends First on this Friday morning. I'm Carly Shimby.
You're literally watching history unfold on your TVs right now. I am Todd Pyro. We have Chad Pergram on the phone with the details. Chad, obviously this thing just ended moments ago. What can you tell us? We saw how close the vote was. What do we need to know?
Well, as you pointed out, this is a budget blueprint. This kind of sets the table for Senate Republicans to forge ahead with their approach to pass President Trump's policy agenda. This package focuses on border security, beefing up the military, and energy production. Notably, the president said he preferred what the House plan is. It's a little more comprehensive because it includes tax cuts. And you noted the nay vote by Rand Paul, the Republican senator from Kentucky. I talked to him on Wednesday, and he made a floor speech about this late in the afternoon yesterday, where he said, this is not real money. He said, you talk about Doge doing all these cuts. He says that's fine. He said what we ought to be doing is actually putting teeth into this to make some of these cuts official, because this is just aspirational, what they're doing here, number one. Number two, he said what it's doing also is authorizing essentially spending more money. And there's some senators and some fiscal conservatives on both sides of the Capitol who say they're very leery about them, say, cutting taxes approving more money for the military, approving more money for border security, about $175 billion, and then maybe blowing a hole in the deficit. They have to make the math work on this somehow. But what has happened, the Senate is ahead in the process here. Again, this sets the stage to do this. The House, they're going to try to do their version of the bill next week. It's unclear if they have the votes. But here's the most important thing, and this is very technical, but it is of paramount importance. They can't get over a filibuster unless they have this budget blueprint in place. You'll hear this term batted around, budget reconciliation. What that allows you to do, if you have a budget blueprint in place like this, is you can bypass a filibuster. You don't need 60 votes. There are only 53 Republicans in the Senate. So that's important. Here's the rub. The House has to approve the same plan. A, we don't know whether or not the House of Representatives can approve anything, let alone sync up with the Senate. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, said that this was a non-starter. So, they might be dead in the water unless, A, they can get on the same page, and B, both bodies be able to adopt the same thing. Then they can move on to the bill, whatever that might be, with tax cuts or deficit reduction or anything else. Guys?
Yeah, and Chad, the question remains how much the Senate's approval of this budget blueprint really matters, because on Wednesday, Donald Trump said that he supports the one big, beautiful bill that the House is thinking up. So what about that?
That's the other concern, too. Guess what? It's always easier to do one thing rather than two things. And so there's some people thinking if they are, just forging ahead with this plan, and J.D. Vance, the vice president, alluded to this at CPAC yesterday, some people think that this is really just having an option. I asked John Thune, the majority leader, about that the other day. I said, aren't you defying the wishes of the president? And he said, well, we like to have, as he termed it, optionality. So people are kind of viewing this as a fallback. If you're in the House of Representatives and, you have that narrow majority over there, you might think that the Senate is going to jam you. It's a take it or leave it scenario. And this is typical, that you have some tension between the House and Senate no matter what. This is a little bit higher than that, frankly. And it's going to be very tough to get anything through the House of Representatives just because of that narrow margin. You've heard me say it many times. It's about the math. They're not going to get any help from the Democrats on this. You might have some defections. I received several unsolicited phone calls from aides who work from conservative members this past week, or some other conservative members themselves, who said, look, this deficit reduction is a problem for us. They said, I think all they're focused on are these tax cuts, and you can't call for all this additional spending and cut these taxes as deeply as you would like, and then, say you're going to balance the budget. That math does not add up. So that's a problem in solving this riddle as well, guys.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
You've disconnected from the hive mind. Explain.